Campus on 938 Live.
Hello, and you're tuned into the only show on English radio that brings the voices of our youth straight to you from their schools. I'm Angela Lim, and today Campus is coming to you live from Raffles Institution, and we'll be discussing the relevance of literature as a subject of study today. Now, according to recent findings, there are currently only about 3,000 students taking literature today, compared to 16,970 that's in 1992. What is causing the decline in interest in literature when it comes to studying it? Also, according to Senior Minister of State for Education and Law Indrani Raja, the main factor for decline has to do with the introduction of combined humanities at the upper secondary levels, where students have to take social studies as a compulsory component, and also the elective can be geography, history or literature. She also added that another potential factor for the decrease could be there's a common perception that it was difficult to score a good grade for the subject. Is this true, and why are there fewer students pursuing the subject? The students here at Raffles Institution are waiting to weigh in. But before that, we plunge into our discussion. Allow me to introduce our panelists for today. My first panelist is Dr. Warren Liew, who is Associate Professor of English in the NIE at NTU. Patrick Wong is GP teacher here at Raffles Institution. My third panelist is Sarah Tan. She's alumni of RI. She's also relief teaching literature, and she was from the Humanities program as well. And my final guest on the panel is Jeremy Khoo. He's Year 5 student here at RI. Guys, let's give our panelists a warm round of applause. So I'm going to start with Warren. Now, Warren, I'm going to ask you a little bit about your opinion on this. Do you think literature is losing its appeal and popularity as a subject of study today?
Yes, it is, because I think it's useless and pointless.
You personally feel that way?
Yeah, of course I'm being ironic. Right? Irony is one of the key literary concepts.
Right.
But I guess what I'm saying is that, you know, in order to convince ourselves that we're right-headed about our love for literature, we need to anticipate the arguments of some of our most tenacious critics. Right? So I think the arguments for literature's pointlessness can be distilled into three main points, namely that A, literature is irrelevant, right? B, those who study literature are indulgent, and 3, those who preach and teach literature in schools are idealist or idealistic.
So do you feel that you're an idealist, Warren, on some level?
Well, yes and no. But you know, let me explain what the idealist position and maybe all the rest. The other three arguments. The argument against irrelevance, right, asks basically, how are plays, poems, and novels directly relevant to the everyday conduct of human affairs, right? You know, does knowing T.S. Eliot's poem "The Wasteland," for example, help save the environment? You know, do we go to the canteen reciting Shakespeare's sonnets to buy our food, etc., etc.? Some people say that because literature is made out of fictions, right? Those who love literature are kind of escaping from reality and ignoring the urgent concerns of the world. So that's the first argument, that's irrelevant, right? The argument against people who study literature being indulgent, right, says that literature gives students the license to just indulge their personal feelings and emotions and subjective opinions. It's a touchy-feely subject. But the flip side of that argument also is that literature students tend to be over-analytical, right? They kind of over-intellectualize art, whereas people kind of read books for entertainment and enjoyment. Literature students try to look for hidden meanings, hidden behind metaphors and symbols and allegories and all that, right? So that's literature students are a bit lame and kind of out of sync with reality in that sense. But finally, the idealist argument, right, says I think it's the most probably the most difficult to answer, and this has to do with the fact that we live in an economically pragmatic society. And I think most of us know that in the relentless competition for scarce resources, right, literature has to compete with other subjects that arguably are more valuable in the larger scheme of things. So, for example, I think a student mentioned earlier that literature is not a prerequisite for entry into the university, for example. Right.
So the idea that it's not perceived as very pragmatic in society is actually making it take a back seat in terms of when people choose it as a subject of study, particularly post-secondary, right, in their post-secondary education. So thanks for weighing in on that. The three different aspects of why people are not really pursuing literature. The idea that it's irrelevant, that it's idealistic, and that people who pursue it are indulgent. We're going to hear from our students in just a bit whether they agree on all these 3 points that Warren has brought up. But let's go to Patrick now. Now, Patrick, you teach GP here at Raffles Institution, but you actually have a background in literature. Could you tell us a bit more about how you feel about whether fewer students you've noticed are taking up literature and are interested in your experience as a teacher here?
Okay, from what I understand from the school, because I don't teach the subject, the numbers have remained fairly consistent here in RI. We have about 15% of the cohort who take literature, and that includes, of that 15%, 35 to 40% of them are actually science students who choose to do it because it's a contrasting subject. And also, I think because they love it and they're really good at it. So in terms of the health check in RI, I think it's still fairly healthy. You can't convince everyone to take lit. I think that's asking for too much. Yeah.
Why, in your opinion, do you think it's difficult for people to see the value in literature? And we can see from the figures that the numbers have been going down very drastically. Why do you think people do not see the value in that?
I think picking up from earlier point about being a very pragmatic society, we are raised that way. So we tend to want things that we can measure. So things like taking math, taking economics, you can measure that, right? Science, in a way, it's measurable. Yeah, but my approach really is that there isn't really much difference between science and lit. The kind of thinking that you apply to both is basically the same. You have a hypothesis. You look for text or evidence. You test it. And sometimes you make a leap of logic, a leap of faith, which science also requires. So, I don't think it's, yeah.
Sometimes it's really about people being able to see that, see the similarities between all the subjects and how all of the subjects can really be pragmatic, literature included. We're going to hear more from our audience as well, but whether they agree about the pragmatism of literature. We're going now to Sarah Tan, who is the alumni here. She's also relief teaching. Now, Sarah, you teach literature right now, but you're not intending to pursue it as a subject of study when you go into university. Can you tell us some reasons for why or why not, even though you're initially interested in literature?
Okay. Well, actually, just because I'm not pursuing it in university doesn't mean I'm not still interested in literature. I think literature is not so much about knowledge that you gain from learning the subject, but it's about a skill. It's a skill that can be applied across many different fields, particularly the humanities. What skill is this? This skill is, for me, it's about understanding the way words are used in different contexts and how this can change the meaning that is conveyed. So that's why I chose to relief teach literature as one of the 2 subjects that I was supposed to teach. Yes.
Right. So the role of teachers, I think, is something we want to discuss as well. How can literature be taught in a way that helps to bring out the best in the subject, such that students can feel passionate about it and they can learn to love it for what it is and everything that it entails? We're going to find out more from Sarah and from our students as well. Now, final guest here is Jeremy. Now, Jeremy, you're a year 5 student here at RI, and I want to get your opinion on this. You study literature, right?
Yes, that's right.
So what do you like about it? What do you enjoy about literature?
Well, literature is the study of how language is used, and so I take an interest in how a word can have different connotations, and how the best authors who write literature, they use their knowledge and their understanding of the language as a whole to shape the words they write on the page to bring out a very specific effect depending on what they want to do. And the study of that is deeply analytical. It is not fluffy, and it is not about being sentimental or being subjective and talking about your feelings.
Right. That's kind of what Warren is saying as well, that there's a whole spectrum of skills that literature can teach, ranging from being very analytical to being imaginative and creative. We're going to explore that spectrum in just a bit with our student audience here at Raffles Institution. Campus will return in just a moment. Do stay tuned. We're coming to you live from RI.
Campus on 938 Live.
Thanks for staying with us here on Campus on 938 Live. Today we're discussing whether the study of literature is pointless in this day and age. We're going to go straight to our student audience now, having heard from our panelists. One of our students here is ready to answer this question. Hi, what's your name?
Hi, my name is Bradley.
Bradley, do you study literature?
Yes, I do study literature.
Do you love literature?
I love literature.
Tell us why.
Growing up as a child, I think literature has been a very integral part of my passion about really the books I read, how I explore and see the world. And I think that now, as a Year 5 student in Raffles studying literature, I really have begun to appreciate how the language is, the skill of crafting words is what we study essentially in literature. And really, language is found everywhere in the world. It's not just limited to books. It's in the news. It's in how people communicate. And the understanding of how words are used is, I think, very fundamental and very essential to how we as people communicate and how we understand the messages of society that are around us.
Right. So where do you think that passion or the interest comes from?
I think fundamentally for myself in my own life, it has come of just the love of being able to discover new ideas, new landscapes through the use of language. And I think that's a very powerful tool. The tool of narrative, the tool of poetry, the tool of rhyme is very powerful in bringing out landscapes and images that can shape, form opinions. Yeah.
Right. So that's one reason why, of course, Bradley loves literature. We're going to hear from another one of our students in just a bit. Xiaoning is ready with a comment to make. Hi. Can you tell me whether or not you enjoy literature?
I do enjoy literature.
Well, what are your reasons for studying it?
I don't study literature, but I just like...
but you love it.
Like what Bradley says, right? Actually, it's very interesting and very fun to be able to discover new ideas within text. And sometimes, like when you do like reading, you won't be able to see the meaning behind words. But when you go delve deeper into those words, then you start to realize that the beauty of words that it's hidden behind. So it takes actually a lot of analytical skills, so it's not really fluff like one of the panelists did as well.
Once again, the idea that there's a soft skill or maybe even a very important hard skill that you eventually might apply into your life in future when it comes to career progression or what you're considering for yourself to be pragmatic in the future. We're going to hear more from our students here at Raffles Institution. Today we're coming to you live